I, Good day to everyone. I'm really happy all of you made it to the rescheduled session of tooth whitening. I'm extremely sorry for what happened last time. We had technical difficulties. We have sorted them all, and now I'm happy to present this topic on tooth whitening. Hope you enjoy this session. Today I've chosen this topic because the concepts of tooth whitening are not fully understood by the clinicians. The undergraduate curriculum focuses on the theoretical aspects and does not offer a thorough clinical perspective. Hence, a scientific approach towards a successful clinical outcome becomes very, very important. Tooth whitening has gained widespread popularity in the past 2 to 3 decades, thanks to the glamour industry and to the young millennials who lay lots of emphasis on self love. Across the globe these days, we see loads of specialty whitening centers catering to a large section of people. The only worry in these setups is that they adopt one strategy, that is in-office bleach, to treat all sorts of discolorations. This is a major worry to be addressed. Most of the times when we mention the word whitening, it is quite intimidating to lots of dentists as the clinical case selection, planning, and treatment are not clearly thought during their undergraduate days. The most popular question we come across is suggest one solution to treat all kinds of situations. But in reality, every case requires a different protocol, which is based on a very, very thorough examination. 3 point strategy which works in most situations. We call it think, plan, and start. Here is what we should do. Never jump to a case of tooth whitening right away. First, you should stop and think about how you can help the patient or the particular client. Second, we need to question ourselves if we have the right infrastructure or the materials to perform a particular treatment aspect. Third, make a checklist after thorough examination and treatment planning. Fourth, plan the steps from the start to finish. Write it down on a piece of paper. Fifth, sit down and then start working. But most of the times what we do is we start the other way around and end ourselves in severe, severe problems. Important to answer these questions before we start our tooth whitening journey. We need to understand what are we dealing with, what compounds are we using, and how they're going to work. To be specific, we are dealing with two kinds of discolorations. One we call it the dyes and the other we call it the pigments. To make it simple, pigments are color bearing agents with no reactive group. They do not bond to the organic matter in the interprismatic spaces of the enamel. They're just loosely bound and can be easily removed. A normal oral prophylaxis, scaling and polishing would suffice in most of the cases. You don't require bleaching agents more often here. But dyes are different. They're molecules with reactive groups. They bond to organic matter and metal ions both chemically. So these chemical bonds make it very, very difficult to remove. The strategy here is to break these bonds and remove them. Basically, your extrinsic stains, which include your tea, coffee stains, tobacco stains, cigarette stains, etc. These are the most common ones and require minimalistic strategies. That is the least invasive tooth whitening strategies. Among the pigments we have seen, the tobacco related pigments are the ones which are on the rise. The tobacco stains along with the tea coffee stains can be successfully treated using oral prophylaxis and polishing, or use of microabrasion and minimalistic night bleaching. Here you can see a case which has been successfully treated by scaling and polishing. Oral prophylaxis would be more than enough. A week of night bleaching would complete this case. So you don't require harsh bleaching agents to treat this case. It can be completely treated with a minimalistic approach. on the other hand, are stubborn and they chemically bond to the tooth structure, as I previously mentioned. The common ones are the tetracycline and the fluorosis stains. Dentists also contribute to some of these in the form of materials and medicaments used in restorative dentistry, particularly the endodontic ones. These dyes are drawn into interprismatic spaces just like how oil is sucked through a wick. These react with organic matter and metallic ions inside the tooth substance and they form strong ring-like structures. Structures would look like. The strategy for removal is to break these rings into simpler, small single bond molecules. These single bond molecules are lighter and smaller and can be easily removed from the tooth structure. Here we have a pictorial which shows the journey of dyes and pigments, how they enter and how they interact with tooth substance. Pigments are mostly on the exterior, whereas the dyes penetrate deeper and chemically interact with both enamel and dentine. Here we can see how the strong ring-like structure, the larger molecules are broken down by the peroxyl ions of the bleaching agent into smaller double bonds. Again, they are further broken down into smaller single bonds. In this process, the molecules become smaller and smaller and they become lighter also, and they are in the end thrown out of the tooth substance. That's how the peroxyl ions or the bleaching agents remove these larger, darker colored dyes. So, what are the agents which can produce peroxyl ions? Number one is hydrogen peroxide, number two is carbamide peroxide, and number three is sodium perborate. Whatever the agent may be, the final end product is hydrogen peroxide, which further breaks down to form peroxyl ion. Carbamide peroxide is a fine white powder which produces urea and hydrogen peroxide when it reacts with water. Approximately 10% carbamide peroxide releases 3% hydrogen peroxide. To be more specific, it's around 3.3% hydrogen peroxide. So if we have a 30% carbamide peroxide product, we would generate close to around 10% hydrogen peroxide. Sodium perborate is another tooth whitening product which reacts with water to form sodium metaborate and hydrogen peroxide along with some oxygen radicals. 95% of sodium perborate releases close to around 9.9% of hydrogen peroxide. Now that we understand hydrogen peroxide is the chief ingredient responsible for tooth whitening, we should know how it acts. Here we have two equations. One on the top is in response to light and heat activation. Here hydrogen peroxide generates loads of weak oxygen free radical which has minimal tooth whitening effects. Whereas at the bottom you can see at a particular pH of around 10, hydrogen peroxide breaks down into loads of strong peroxyl free radicals. The peroxyl free radicals are responsible for maximum tooth whitening effects. So we should be looking at products at a pH of around 10 to get the maximum peroxyl ions. There are several other activating systems for these bleaching agents like the floodlights, plasma arcs or lasers. There have been conflicting literature on the benefits of these activating systems. Some of the literature indicate very good effects while the others report otherwise. Johnson and colleagues evaluated the effectiveness of light activation on in-office bleaches. They found no statistically significant differences in color change or color stability over a 6 months period when bleaching was performed with or without light. So the use of light has had no obvious advantages. Interesting article from Kozats and colleagues. They found that the light source did not produce any superior result and had a higher tooth sensitivity after 24 hours of bleaching. There have been several articles on the raise in pulpal temperatures when the light activation was used. Here's one such article where Hahn and colleagues have shown that the intra-pulpal temperatures would raise to 14 to 17 degrees centigrade. However, this article can be interpreted differently. It is true that the pulpal temperatures increase to a higher amount in young individuals, that is, young permanent tooth, but the older ones have smaller pulp chambers and have less impact. The temperatures would not raise to such substantial numbers in the older population. The conflicting reports on the use of light activation on bleaching agents. However, light could accelerate and reduce the time required to a certain level. It's a work in progress. Let's see what happens in future. Let's move on to the more interesting part on the options and strategies to achieve a predictable bleaching result. Here we have segregated the strategies for vital and non-vital bleaching. In the non-vital category, we have the in-office and the walking bleach option. In the vital tooth category, we have the in-office and the night bleach options. The over-the-counter products such as the whitening strips are not very popular and currently not available in the Indian market. Before we start with the protocols, let's discuss the general rules. To start off, we should make a note of the patient's age, which will give us a clear idea on the size of the pulp chamber we are dealing with. Defects such as abrasions and previous restorations in the patient mouth should be properly noted down. Any history of hypersensitivity should be carefully dealt with. We have to categorize on the type of stain, whether it is a dye or a pigment, because this will give us or lead us to a protocol to suit a particular scenario, since dyes have a different protocol to deal with and pigments have a different protocol to deal with. Finally, patient acceptance and expectations should be gauged, and the time allocation must be clearly defined and explained to the patient. Before starting off a case, these are the basic do's one should make note of. The first one is to take a proper history and record the shade. A photograph with the shade tab, like the one shown in the slide, is more appropriate. Talk to your patients about the options, treatment times, and the costs involved. Please let your clients know that they would require top-ups at specified intervals, might be after 3 months or 6 months, to sustain this final result. The dentist should control the amount of bleach used, especially in the cases of night bleaching. The patients must be given only one syringe at a time. The dentist should gauge the result and then continue with future procedures. Please do not give all the syringes at one time. The dentist should always check for composites, veneers, and crowns inside a patient's mouth before bleaching. Okay, please check clinically and radiographically, because some of the composites and veneers are so well made that you cannot clinically distinguish them. Warn your patients that these restorations will not bleach and may require replacement after tooth whitening. Failure to do so might land you in big trouble. The basic don'ts are, don't promise the moon to your patient. Please give a realistic picture to your client. Use reputed bleaching kits with proper certifications to achieve good results. Please do not use near expiry or expired material. Principles. Let us begin with the techniques for whitening of vital tooth. Before starting off any case of vital bleaching, a thorough oral prophylaxis and polishing should be done. This is because residual plaque and saliva might neutralize the bleaching agents due to the presence of catalases and peroxidases within them. So always do a thorough oral prophylaxis followed by polishing before starting off a vital bleaching case. Should always start with the least invasive ones. Microabrasion and night bleaching are surely less invasive than the in-office bleaching. Microabrasion is an effective method of correcting the color with a minimal invasive approach. Mixture of 6.6% hydrochloric acid with silicon carbide microparticles can remove mild to moderate fluorosis stains with minimal loss of tooth structure. Here we have another case which is managed successfully using 18% hydrochloric acid based microabrasion paste. With just 17% hydrochloric acid, always be careful when you're doing such cases. Rubber dam becomes very mandatory because it hydrochloric acid can cause severe burns to the gingiva. After the bleaching is over, the residual hydrochloric acid should be neutralized using sodium bicarbonate. A combination therapy is normally required when dealing with pitted surfaces. Microabrasion should be performed first to eliminate these pits. This should be followed by night bleaching using carbamide peroxide containing bleaches like 24 karat, or you can use an in-office bleach. This depends on the amount of time available to the patient. Another peculiar situation is the presence of black stains in certain individuals. These are basically due to chromogenic bacteria or iron metabolism problems. The black stains are due to the presence of iron sulfide. These stains go off after bleaching, but they come back very fast. Um, Several studies have recommended the use of a 475 nanometer blue light for a period of 8 minutes every day to reduce the iron staining, black staining. Certain literatures also have recommended the use of lactoferrin rinses to get sustained predictable results. I also found a very interesting article on the use of virgin coconut oil, which plays a very important role in removing the black stain. The next less invasive strategy is the use of carbamide peroxide based home bleaches. These bleaches are available in different strengths from 15, 20, 25, 30 and 35% carbamide peroxide. As I've explained earlier, a 10% carbamide peroxide produces close to around 3% hydrogen peroxide. Preparation of a custom tray for its application. First, impression of the tooth is made and a cast is poured. The labial surfaces of the cast are coated with a light curing resin such as Ultrablock from Prevez Denpro. This resin provides the relief or space for the bleach in the final tray. On top of this cast, a well-fitting thermoplastic bleaching tray is made. It is trimmed properly so that there are no sharp edges. Some patients experience difficulties in using these trays like excessive salivation, sleeplessness, etc. So I advise patients to wear these empty trays for 3 to 4 days to get used to them. After that, the bleaching gel such as 24 karat, which is available in different concentrations, is dispensed into the thermoplastic tray, and the patient is advised to wear the tray 6 to 8 hours for 1 to 2 weeks. Then the results are gauged and further treatment is planned. Sometimes there are isolated stains or one or two teeth. To treat this kind of situation, a blob of composite is placed on the stained areas of the tooth without etching and bonding. After proper curing, an impression of these teeth are taken and a cast is prepared. So you can see on the cast the added composite on the areas of concern. This acts in the same way as the resin blockout in the previous case. Is prepared over the prepared cast. You can see the typical reservoirs on the teeth in question. The bleaching agents are dispensed into these particular teeth and the patient is instructed to wear them for a stipulated period of time. By this method, injudicious use of bleaching agents on the adjacent tooth is prevented so that only the teeth in questions are bleached and the other teeth are just left off. Now we move on to the most rapid method of bleaching. The in-office bleaches are slightly more invasive, but they provide faster results in patients with limited time availability. In-office bleaches can be done with a soft dam also or with a rubber dam. Here we have a case managed by a product called Florence from Prives Denpro Limited. It is an in-office bleach. This bleaching case has been managed with a soft dam called Gingiva Shield. The first step in this process is to take a preoperative shade tab photograph uh, to keep a record of the preoperative shade. This is followed by the application of a gingival shield, which is a gingival barrier which prevents any harm to the gingival tissue. Hydrogen peroxide is very caustic, so it can cause burns on gingival tissue. This is followed by application of the bleaching gel. Here, this product has a powder and a liquid. The liquid is hydrogen peroxide, which is mixed with the powder, which forms a gel. The gel is uniformly applied over the labial surfaces of the tooth, and it is kept there for a period of 20 minutes under strict isolation. A high vacuum evacuator, cheek retractor, and cotton rolls are mandatory to prevent any further harm. If the patient is completely okay after the first 20 minutes, we can proceed for another 20 minutes. The procedure is done without any local anesthesia because the patient cannot sense any sensitivity or any harm if local anesthesia was given during the procedure. Here, after a 30-minute bleaching session, you can see at least 2 to 3 shades difference. The in-office bleaching provides the fastest way of changing the tooth shades. These are the few cases contributed by Dr. Neeti Sood from Delhi. The same protocols were followed, and you can see the amazing results after 20 to 30 minutes of bleaching. It's been managed very well by Dr. Sood. Here you can see that a thorough oral prophylaxis and subgingival scaling was done prior to the bleaching session, leading to excellent results. In one of our previous cases, we have not done a thorough scaling in the lower anterior region, leading to a slightly inferior result. You can also see hydrogen peroxide burns in areas which have not been covered completely by the liquid dam. So you should take proper care to avoid such issues. However, these burns can be completely managed. A proper rubber dam application can be used to prevent such hydrogen peroxide burns. This cuts out all the tensions. Better isolation and better protection of the gums can be easily achieved by using a rubber dam. Due to hydrogen peroxide, vitamin E oil should be immediately applied over the concerned area. The harm can be reversed in a matter of 1 or 2 days. Please do not exceed 30 to 40 minutes for a single in-office bleach session, even if the treatment is not satisfactory. After the session is over, irrigate thoroughly with water and gently polish. You can apply a neutral sodium fluoride gel for 2 to 3 minutes to avoid any hypersensitivity. Use of robust remineralizing agents such as bioenamel, which contains novamine, or use of CPP ACP based remineralizing agents should be encouraged for at least 3 to 4 weeks. The patient should be instructed to avoid foods containing high level of pigments such as tea, coffee, red wine, etc. to prevent restaining. Is for treating non-vital tooth with intrinsic stains. This can be due to pulpal disease or due to iatrogenic causes. This is by conducting a thorough examination of the quality of the root canal obturation and the quality of the coronal seal. Any deficiencies in this should be addressed by performing a proper retreatment. The second and the most important step in this procedure is to place a 3 to 4 mm barrier at the level of the cemento-enamel junction. This barrier prevents the escape of hydrogen peroxide through the open cemento-enamel junctions and down the root canal space. How to do it? This I would explain in the further slides. Failure to establish a cervical barrier will lead to seepage of hydrogen peroxide at the cervical level, leading to activation of osteoclastic activity and thereby causing cervical resorption. The barrier should not be flat and should follow the contour of the CJ. Any excessive barrier material would cause a black band at the neck of the tooth. The CJ is not flat and curves incisally and in the proximal areas, so a proper care should be taken so that the barrier also follows the same contour of the CJ. Can be used to gauge the level of the CJ. Probing on the labial and the proximal sides can give us some data which will help us in the placement of the CJ barrier. This slide shows a perfect barrier shape. Honestly, however, this is very difficult to achieve in most of the situations. Several cements have been used as a barrier till date, such as the IRM, zinc phosphate, or glass ionomers, or temporary cements such as Orafil G. However, my personal choice has been the high strength capsulated glass ionomer cements such as the Micron Superior capsules because it gives me more convenience, um, proper powder liquid ratios, and the ease of application because the applicator tip can actually reach the exact area where it is required to. The powder liquid versions are messy to carry and placed at the cervical end. After proper barrier placement, the material of choice for intercranial bleaching is been sodium perborate. It can be mixed with water, saline, glycerin, or hydrogen peroxide. I do not prefer hydrogen peroxide because it causes too much bubbling, which might cause dislodgement of the final restoration. So I prefer mixing it with saline and glycerin. It can be the action can be slightly delayed, but this it is not significantly different. Perborate is delivered into the pulp chamber using an amalgam carrier. Sealed using zinc phosphate cement or glass ionomer like Micron Superior for a period of 2 to 7 days. In this case, you can see a good result in less than 10 days. The intracorneal bleaching should be stopped when the treated tooth becomes one shade lighter than the adjacent tooth. This is done to compensate for the color rebound effect. So there is a one shade color rebound after the bleaching procedure is over. So to compensate that, we stop the bleaching, intracorneal bleaching, when the tooth in question is one shade lighter than the adjacent tooth. Here is another successful case treated using the same protocol. You can see very good results within a period of 7 to 10 days. Bleaching of the stumps have become mandatory now because we've been using all ceramic crowns. If the stumps are not bleached, the black discoloration of the stump will show up through the crown. So bleaching of discolored stump should be done by intracorneal bleaching before all ceramic crowns have been placed over there. Coronal bleaching procedure, the agent should be completely washed away and then neutralized using sodium bicarbonate. Composite restorations in these cases should be delayed as the residual free radical will interfere with polymerization. If there is no time, citrates can be used to remove these residual free radicals so that an immediate composite restoration can be placed. However, it's better to delay it by 1 to 2 weeks after an intracorneal bleaching is done. Lastly, I would end up my presentation with a few protocols to address few difficult and special situations. The treatment of cases with amelogenesis imperfecta, it is not very difficult as everyone thinks. The cases must first be treated using microabrasion to remove all the pitted surface. Further, a night bleach for 3 to 4 weeks with intermittent remineralization is normally adequate. A last call can be taken after the final treatment whether direct or indirect laminates have to be placed. Most of the cases can be tackled with just microabrasion and night bleaches. Any residual aesthetics required can be managed using direct composites or laminates and veneers. Treatment of dentinogenesis imperfecta. Diagnosis can be done using radiographs where you can see complete obliteration of the pulp spaces. These cases normally don't require crowns in all cases. They can be treated with long-term, that is 8-month cycles of home bleach with intermittent 2 weeks of remineralization. This is a typical textbook case where a patient with dentinogenesis imperfecta was treated completely with a home bleach protocol. Tetracycline stains are also very difficult to remove. It is caused by chelation and the stain deepens on exposure to light, making it even more difficult to remove. These tetracycline stains can also be managed to a certain extent using the same night bleach and remineralization intermittently for a period of 8 to 9 months. The final result can be validated, and if required, crowns or direct composites or veneers could be planted. However, in all cases, it is critical to stop bleaching at a particular stage. The bleach can eventually break the carbon-carbon double bonds of enamel too. Any appearance of powdery enamel should warrant discontinuing of the bleaching protocol. So you should be looking at signs where you need to stop. This is very important when you bleach for a substantially long period of time. Require proper remineralization. 2 weeks of remineralization after every bleaching cycle is critical and recommended. I prefer using noamine based therapies such as the bioenamel Iprivis, because one thing, it offers lots of convenience. It is a pen with a brush, so the patient can carry it everywhere, so it's more convenient. However, CPP ACP with fluoride content has shown promise as a remineralizing agent. A proper word of caution in the end: please be extremely careful when the patient has large pulp chambers, has severe hypersensitivity issues, has presence of cracks on the tooth, or a patient is going through a pregnancy or in the phase of lactation. There have been cases of peroxide allergy, so you need to be careful, although we have not seen too many in India. Wave benefits and side effects. Tooth whitening requires proper planning and reliable materials to get the predictable results. Always plan a bleaching case with a realistic goal in mind. Keep the patient informed in all situations. Help your patients smile better. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming here and listening to such a long lecture. This time for personalized attention, we have decided to answer all your questions on WhatsApp. You can WhatsApp me on 9623625336, or you can reach me at s_saikalyan@rediffmail.com. It was a pleasure being with all of you. Take care, stay home, stay safe.